Some people see the world through a lens that never stops zooming in. Not the gentle focus that lets you appreciate a sunset, but the kind of clarity that reveals every crack in the paint, every hesitation in a voice, every unspoken truth hanging in the air. It doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if your mind begs for simplicity. The details keep flooding in, relentless and unavoidable. Most humans navigate existence with a built-in filter. They absorb what serves them and let the rest fade into the background. But certain minds lack that protective barrier. For them, perception runs at full intensity always. And while this might appear to be wisdom or insight, it frequently resembles living in a house made entirely of glass. Nothing gets softer. Nothing becomes vague. Nothing truly fades away. When hyperawareness defines your reality, you don't simply live through experiences. You dissect them in real time. You detect what remains unsaid before language catches up. You register discomfort before it crystallizes into words. You recognize when the atmosphere shifts, long before anyone else acknowledges the change. And during silence, during supposed calm, your consciousness continues its relentless work, evaluating, decoding, piecing together meaning. This isn't voluntary overthinking. This is a nervous system that never discovered the off switch. And here's what most observers fail to grasp. This intensity of perception isn't purely beneficial. Sometimes it resembles a state of permanent wakefulness that never figured out how to find rest. A consciousness that became so skilled at vigilance, it lost access to the peace that comes from letting go. That's the real starting point of this exploration. For the hypervigilant mind, existence isn't a collection of straightforward moments. It's a puzzle, silent, invisible, perpetually assembling itself in the background. Every human exchange transforms into something requiring resolution. Not from paranoia, but from conditioning. You don't merely register someone's words. You measure the gap between their statement and when they chose to speak. You don't simply observe a grin. You detect the microsecond it dissolved prematurely. You don't just receive a text. You sense the gravity of what remained untyped. Why that particular phrasing? Why this timing instead of another? Why does this space feel altered today, despite appearing identical? While others immerse themselves in the present, your cognition operates on a parallel track, drawing connections, recognizing cycles, constantly refreshing its internal map of reality. It resembles operating with dual monitors permanently active. One dimension of you engages, the other watches, computes, recalibrates. A simple message isn't merely communication. A postponed response isn't just schedule conflict. A vocal inflection change isn't simply emotional fluctuation, it's evidence. And this perpetual evaluation drains you, not because it's pessimistic, but because it operates without pause. Your cognition approaches social dynamics the way a programmer approaches architecture. When variables shift, there must be causation. So you investigate, you reconstruct dialogues, you hunt for contradictions. You attempt to comprehend what's occurring beneath observable surfaces so you can remain grounded, ready, protected. The contradiction is that internally, none of this registers as excessive. It registers as prudent, considerate, even essential. But gradually, something subtle occurs. The analysis begins to supplant the lived moment. You become so consumed with deciphering what existence signifies that you rarely get permission to simply inhabit it. And quietly, without recognition, genuine presence gets exchanged for analytical accuracy. There exists a particular form of awareness that doesn't merely observe external reality. It observes its own observation. Psychologists label this metacognition, the capacity to examine your own cognitive processes. For most humans, it activates sporadically. For the hyper-aware, it rarely deactivates. You don't simply experience an emotion. You instantly recognize that you're experiencing it. Then you question its origin. Then you assess whether that response is warranted. Then you contemplate what it reveals about your character. By the time the feeling completes its journey through your system, your intellect has already examined it from multiple perspectives. Grief doesn't arrive in isolation. It brings interrogation. Is this reasonable? Is this proportionate? Is this historical trauma? Or is this about the present? Even happiness gets scrutinized. You can experience delight while simultaneously stepping outside of it, watching yourself experience delight, wondering about its duration or what might shatter it. It resembles performing choreography while perpetually examining your reflection. You might master the technique, but you miss the rhythm. This additional layer of self-observation generates depth, but it simultaneously generates separation, because when you're constantly monitoring yourself, you're rarely completely inside the experience. You're half participating, half documenting, half feeling, half narrating. Over time, this converts inner experience into a form of quiet self-surveillance. Your thoughts get monitored. Your emotions get audited. Your responses get filtered before they're permitted to land. What started as self-understanding slowly transforms into self-interruption. And the cruelest aspect is that it feels intelligent, accountable, evolved. But consciousness was never designed to simultaneously perform and critique. When reflection turns inward this way, it doesn't merely mirror, it cycles. And within that cycle, authenticity begins to vanish. Eventually, awareness stops functioning as a tool and becomes a revelation. You start perceiving behind the facade of human conduct. And once you do, something quietly transforms. You recognize that people don't always communicate their genuine meaning. That generosity can contain contingencies. That warmth sometimes arrives with unvoiced demands. You grasp that numerous interactions aren't purely about genuine connection. They're about validation, influence, presentation, or anxiety. Not because humans are malicious, but because they're complex. And with that comprehension comes a subtle form of mourning. When you perceive too profoundly, it becomes challenging to accept things at surface level. Praise feels multifaceted. Remorse feels insufficient. Commitments sound conditional even when they're genuine. You can still value the exchange, but there's perpetually an awareness of what might be operating underneath it. This is where a quiet sorrow emerges. The sorrow of losing naivety. Not adolescent innocence, but interpersonal innocence. The capacity to accept words as words, actions as actions, affection as something uncomplicated. Once you've witnessed how frequently people contradict their own narratives, how anxiety masquerades as certainty, how devotion and doubt can coexist simultaneously, you cannot completely reverse that vision. Relationships begin resembling a performance between expectation and reality. Exchange becomes something you decode instead of simply absorb. You recognize that most dialogue is miscommunication wearing the costume of understanding. And that awareness, while precise, can be isolating. Because when you perceive behind the performance, you're no longer merely an audience member. You're conscious of the mechanisms, the staging, the delicate infrastructure sustaining everything. And even when the production is magnificent, part of you recognizes how effortlessly it could collapse. That knowledge doesn't render you pessimistic. It renders you cautious and occasionally somewhat solitary. For deeply perceptive individuals, empathy isn't something they activate intentionally. It operates continuously in the background, like software that never enters sleep mode. You don't merely process what people articulate, you absorb the emotional substance beneath it. You detect when someone is withholding. You observe the modification in their posture, the constriction in their vocal quality, the instant their gaze shifts away. Long before verbalization occurs, you already sense something is wrong. Psychology frequently labels this cognitive empathy, the ability to comprehend another person's internal landscape without explicit communication. But for the hyper-aware, it transcends understanding. It becomes absorption. Feelings don't stop at your perceptual boundary. They penetrate you. A strained environment leaves your chest constricted. A companion's unvoiced melancholy accompanies you afterward. Someone else's unease persists in your body long after the interaction concludes. This is what people rarely perceive externally. To them, you appear composed, emotionally literate, stable. You're the individual who interprets subtext, who selects language deliberately, who recognizes when to hesitate and when to soften your delivery. You're frequently the person others feel secure with because you make them feel witnessed. But there's a price for that variety of empathy. When you're perpetually attuned to everyone else's emotional broadcast, You begin carrying feelings that were never yours to shoulder. You detect guilt, strain, frustration, even when nobody requests your involvement. And because you comprehend where those feelings originate, you rarely reject them. You contain them, you navigate them, you stabilize the environment. Over time, this generates a quiet disproportion. You become the emotional vessel, absorbing, interpreting, soothing. And while this appears like fortitude, it frequently produces depletion. Because when you're consistently the one who comprehends, nobody considers checking whether you need comprehension too. Empathy that never powers down doesn't merely connect you to others. It slowly teaches you to dissolve inside that connection. And that's when awareness begins feeling burdensome, not because you care excessively, but because you're sustaining more than one nervous system simultaneously. Awareness doesn't reside exclusively in cognition. For numerous hyper-aware individuals, it resides in the body first. Psychology identifies this as interoception, the ability to detect internal states like pulse, respiration, muscular tension, or energetic shifts. Everyone possesses it. But in certain nervous systems, the volume is amplified. Significantly amplified. You don't merely experience nervousness. You notice your cardiac rhythm accelerate before the thought crystallizes. You detect the compression in your chest, the restricted breathing, the subtle descent in your abdomen. These sensations register as intelligence, and your mind immediately begins translation. Something is problematic. Something is approaching. This is where awareness can quietly shift into anxiety. When the body becomes a perpetual information stream, every sensation begins appearing significant. A flutter transforms into an alert. Exhaustion transforms into a signal. Restlessness transforms into something requiring solution. The boundary between a transient sensation and a genuine threat begins dissolving. The paradox is that this sensitivity didn't emerge to damage you. It emerged to safeguard you. A body that learned to maintain vigilance learned to identify shifts early. But without proper guidance, interoception can redirect inward and magnify distress. The nervous system starts examining itself the way it once examined the environment. Over time, this establishes a circuit. Sensation initiates interpretation. Interpretation initiates tension. Tension generates additional sensation. And suddenly the body feels cacophonous, crowded with signals that never completely settle. Understanding this matters because the objective isn't to diminish sensation. It's to learn which sensations require attention and which ones can simply move through without being converted into narrative. This intensity of awareness doesn't materialize spontaneously. It possesses a history. For numerous people, hyperawareness originates in childhood, not as an inherent trait but as an accommodation. In contexts where emotions were volatile, where attitudes could transform without warning, or where security depended on interpreting subtle indicators, awareness wasn't elective. It was survival. As a child, you may have learned to assess the atmosphere the instant you entered, to recognize the tone before the vocabulary, to sense the emotional climate before determining how to communicate, or whether to communicate at all. You learned when to become invisible, when to be compliant, when to recede just enough to remain safe. Nobody instructed you explicitly. Your nervous system learned it independently. When a child develops needing to anticipate emotional turbulence, their brain becomes extremely attuned to patterns. The prefrontal cortex learns to forecast. The body learns to maintain readiness. Over time, vigilance converts into awareness, and awareness becomes identity. You don't conceptualize yourself as someone who's observing. You conceptualize yourself as someone who's accountable. This is where numerous hyper-aware adults misinterpret themselves. They assume they're overthinking because something is defective within them. But what they're experiencing is the residue of intelligence shaped by necessity. Their sensitivity wasn't born from weakness. It was constructed through adaptation. The tragedy is that what once protected you doesn't always recognize when to disengage. As an adult, your circumstances may be stable. Your relationships may be peaceful, but your nervous system still functions as if transformation could occur at any instant. So it continues scanning, continues monitoring, continues preparing. This is why awareness frequently accompanies exhaustion. You're not fatigued because life is excessively demanding. You're fatigued because your system never learned that it's permitted to rest. Understanding this origin transforms everything. It replaces self-criticism with context. It allows compassion to inhabit where judgment used to reside. You weren't born hyper-aware. You became this way because attention once mattered. And the goal now isn't to eliminate that awareness. It's to teach it that the threat has passed, even if the sensitivity persists. That's where healing commences. Eventually, awareness stops being observation and quietly becomes strategy. Not strategy in the obvious sense, no domination, no deception, but an internal mechanism. If you can forecast what people will do, if you can anticipate emotional shifts before they manifest, maybe you won't be blindsided. Maybe nothing will wound as deeply. This is where hyperawareness converts into a form of preparation. Your mind executes simulations constantly. If they withdraw, you'll already comprehend why. If the atmosphere alters, you'll already be fortified. If something terminates, you'll have anticipated it. Understanding becomes protection. But there's a cost to this kind of vigilance. To remain prepared, you must step slightly outside of life. You stop fully occupying moments because you're too preoccupied tracking where they might lead. Happiness arrives and part of you is already scanning for the descent. Connection develops and your mind starts calculating separation, duration, likelihood. This is how awareness fuels analysis paralysis. Every decision carries significance. Every action gets filtered through potential consequences. You've already inhabited 10 versions of the future before the present has finished materializing. So you hesitate, you postpone. Not because you don't care, but because you care so intensely that you're attempting to protect yourself from regret, loss, or shock. What's ironic is that this attempt at strategy frequently produces the very exhaustion it's attempting to prevent. The mind stays contracted, the body stays mobilized, and life begins resembling something you're administering instead of something you're participating in. Awareness, when employed this way, doesn't create security. It creates separation. Because the more you attempt to outthink uncertainty, the less capacity there is to experience anything without prerequisites. And slowly, without realization, protection supplants presence. The solution to hyperawareness isn't perceiving less. It's carrying less. For an extended period, awareness may have resembled a duty. If you notice something, you felt compelled to interpret it, to address it, to manage it. But not every signal is an assignment. Not every shift requires intervention. And not every insight needs to be pursued to its conclusion. This is where awareness begins to mature into something gentler. Learning to perceive without carrying everything means developing selective perception, the ability to notice without absorbing, to recognize without reacting, to permit certain things to pass through your awareness instead of embedding inside it. There are several quiet truths that help recalibrate the system. Not every silence is a communication. Sometimes people are simply fatigued, preoccupied, or overwhelmed. Not every feeling needs intervention. Emotions can move through you without being resolved, explained, or corrected. And not every insight needs articulation. Some understandings are meant to be held, not shared, not acted upon, not analyzed further. This isn't about becoming negligent or apathetic. It's about restoring equilibrium. Awareness without boundaries converts into suffering. Awareness with boundaries becomes clarity. When you stop treating every perception as urgent, your nervous system begins to decompress. The body learns that noticing doesn't equal danger. The mind learns that it doesn't have to stay ahead to be safe. This shift requires practice. It can feel uncomfortable initially, like releasing a grip you've depended on for years. But slowly, something transforms. You begin to experience moments without immediately stepping outside of them. You laugh without analyzing why. You feel without translating. You listen without preparing a response. You don't lose your depth this way. You reclaim your presence. And awareness, instead of weighing you down, starts feeling like a quiet companion rather than a constant burden. Awareness doesn't need to vanish to bring you peace. It needs to be refined. When awareness is softened by acceptance, it stops feeling like interrogation and starts feeling like warmth. You no longer attempt to control every outcome or decode every silence. You begin to trust that not everything requires understanding to be meaningful. Some moments are meant to be felt, not explained. This is where awareness converts into wisdom. You still notice deeply, but you don't grasp. You still feel intensely, but you let emotions move through without interrogating them. You understand people without dissolving yourself inside their narratives. Presence supplants prediction. Curiosity supplants fear, and something quiet but powerful occurs. Life becomes lighter, not because it's simpler, but because you're no longer carrying it all at once. If this felt familiar, if you recognized yourself somewhere in this awareness, you're not alone. This channel is a space for people who feel deeply and think carefully about the human mind. If you found value here, consider subscribing so we can continue these conversations together. And if any part of this spoke to you, leave a comment below. Your experience might be the clarity someone else needs to feel understood.